Hello, this is Max Mead and welcome to the Unreal Engine 4 tutorial here at De Montfort University's Game Arts course. So the purpose of this tutorial is basically an introduction to Unreal Engine. What is it, where can I find it, and what it's actually used for. Okay, so if we go ahead on the start page, we can either find Unreal Engine on a desktop, or if it's not there for you, we can find it in the start menu by just searching for Unreal. So let's go ahead and hit Unreal Engine. Okay, so we can just click cancel for that for now. So this is basically our home page. This is the splash page. So we've got some information on tutorials, documents that you might need, and basic news feed. So the main button that we actually need to worry about right now is the Launch Unreal Engine. And basically you can choose whether or not you want to launch different versions that you have previously loaded. And it's important that you can't actually open newer versions of a level with an older engine. So that might be a reason you would want to change your launch settings. So some other things, we've got our feed, which is this page here. The library, so we can download different engines or different versions of the engine, I should say. It's also got your projects, so any levels that you've actually created, and the vault is, I think, your online storage for that. The marketplace has just been released sort of publicly as well, and you can download free examples for different games and different styles that can give you an idea of what you want to do with your level. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up a fresh package. So we're just going to go ahead and hit Launch Unreal Engine 4.4. Okay, so we've now got our Unreal Project browser. So we're in version 4.4 now. But we either need to load a previous project, and since we haven't actually made one yet, we won't have anything here. We could load a new project, or you could download things from the marketplace here as well. So we're just going to open that up again. So we've got basic templates to work from. So it's good, especially since if you're just starting out or if you're an artist, you don't particularly want to have to code a player being able to start or spawn. You want something that you can fly around in and you can look straight from the beginning. So we don't want to do a blank project because it doesn't have anything useful for us in it. In fact, we actually want to go down to Blueprint First Person, which is a first-person camera with a movable player camera, a player character, and an example projectile weapon. Or if we wanted to use a third person, we can scroll down further. And we could go to Blueprint Third Person. And the reason I'm not clicking code is because Blueprint is a lot easier for an artist to actually use. It's a sort of visual coding. So we're going to use a first person camera for this. So we want to hit Blueprint First Person. Okay. And this is important, this little checkbox down here where it says include starter content, because if you don't actually include anything, you'll still have a blank map which won't have anything in it. So we want to make sure that this is ticked on so we can actually see something when we first open it. So we're gonna name this. We're gonna just name this whatever we want. I'm just gonna call it example for now. So go ahead and hit create project. Okay, so here we have our first look at the actual Unreal Engine editor. So this is where you essentially make your game level. So if it's your first time opening up Unreal 4, you'll have this welcome tutorial, and you can quite easily follow through this, and it will give you a brief explanation of everything that you might need to know. So it can tell you what the viewport is. So obviously the viewport is your window. It tells you about the modes. Content browser, details panel, scene outliner, and your toolbar. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and close this down and talk about a few of those things in a little bit more detail. So you'll notice that we straight away we're chucked in with this first person template, and it quite clearly says first person template, big blue letters right in the middle. So first of all, we need to talk about how you actually control the camera. So in this viewport, we can move around by holding down the right mouse button and pan dragging. So we can just hold that down and we can drag in whatever direction we want to go and have a look. You can use the arrow keys to move in and out and to the sides. And you can click on things with the left mouse click. Alternatively, if you hold down the right mouse button, you can also use W, A, S, and D to navigate around, and that'll only work if you have the right mouse button actually held down. If we actually want to go ahead and play our level, we can go up to the toolbar here, and we can go ahead and hit play. And because we have a player or character spawn point just here, when we hit play, we'll spawn in that position. And basically now we can just play around as if we would with any game. So WASD to move around, left click to shoot, and spacebar to jump. So this is basically the very fundamentals of a working game. So we'll go ahead and exit this by pressing escape. So let's talk about the toolbar first of all. We have this big save button here. So this saves, it should save everything in the level. So if you make any changes, it's good to save often, because games engines can be quite unreliable and they tend to break the most inconvenient of times. So it's always good to keep on top of things and save iterations of your level. That way you can always go back if something majorly goes wrong. Content. So the content browser is actually this little toolbar here, and we'll get into that more later. But if for some reason we deleted that, we can actually just open the content browser by clicking back on this button. The marketplace, we've discussed that before. It's where you can get various example levels to work from, or example assets as well. Quick settings. So these are some basic settings that probably aren't of that much use to you at this point. So we'll skip over that for now. World settings. World settings pop up in the details panel, which is over here. There's such thing as the light map, channel size. And again, it's not that useful to you if you've never used a game engine and you don't really know what's going on. So we'll skip over that as well. Blueprints and matinee. So blueprints is or are the features of the game. That is what controls things. So you can set up a spawn point. You can set up a cinematic toggle point. Basically any event in the game. This is the area where you would actually make that. Matinee is the movement within that, so you can link the blueprint and the matinee together, and matinee controls where something would go. So it's basically your animation. The build button. Now, Unreal Engine 4 is not a real-time games engine. It has the ability to do real-time lights, but as a whole you need to do something called baking. So baking computes static light data, so your object, depending on its orientation, will cast shadows, or some of the faces will be in shadows. So if we take a look at this little box here, these two faces are in shadow, but if we go ahead and copy this and rotate it, different two faces are in shadow. So basically what you have to do for Unreal Engine is you have to make a light map, which is a second UV channel, and we'll get into that a little later. But essentially what it does is it bakes this lighting on so that we can see it and we don't actually need to compute it. So it's an efficient way of working. You also have lighting quality. So at the moment we're on preview, so if we go ahead and build this at production, well, I'm not going to do because it will take a little while, but if we build this at production, we'll get a better quality finish. You can build geometry, so if you added in a new object, sometimes you need to build it before you can actually see it in engine. And you can build paths, so this will be things like texture paths or AI paths. So it's good if you just press this build, it will build everything in the level. Okay, so we've used play already. So play actually you can run around in this viewport and you can go ahead and play the level. But simulate is it's essentially we can actually still click on everything outside of this. We can still make changes, but the engine is effectively running the level in real time. So everything is still happening as it would in the engine, but we can still make changes. So sometimes you won't be able to actually affect things if you have simulate on, so we can just go ahead and press stop to pop back into our working preview. Launch is not something you particularly need to worry about. This is if you're exporting it to actually being able to play it on a specific console or on your PC. So generally that's right at the end of your sort of making process. This is sort of your alpha. Okay, so let's talk about the viewport. Now the viewport we've touched upon briefly. It is the window into the world. So we have a drop-down menu right on the top left. We can toggle whether or not our viewport is real-time. We can show stats, and we can show the frames per second. And it's important to actually see your frames per second in the level, because if your level isn't running at your 30 frames a second target, then you'll start to notice it'll get a little choppy. So I'm sure that some of you that have played games before, I'm hoping you all have, will understand that when your frame rate drops below a certain point, games become unplayable. So it's an important part of an artist's work is to actually make games work. So we have field of view, that's the field of view for this camera. We can make that insane or really, really tight, but generally speaking we want to just actually leave that how it is. So we'll go ahead and put that back to 60 or 80. 80 looks alright. Okay, so game view. So we can either take that on, or we can press G. So G will actually toggle that on and off. And you'll notice that some of the stuff disappears when you press that. And these are the things that we won't see in game. So if we're playing the game and we press G, or if we're in the screen and we press G, this is how the game will look. You won't ever see these particular things. So don't worry if something's massive in your scene. If it's only this, it won't actually show up in the game. Immersive mode, so it's full screen. So we can toggle that by pressing F11 as well. Well, supposedly you can. I think I've toggled off my F key, so ignore that for now. Okay, you shouldn't need to worry about too much else of that. So we have perspective, which is the mode that we're in, so it has real world perspective in it. We can go into orthographic views, but you notice if we click on those, everything's in sort of wireframe, so it can be a little bit harder to distinguish whereabouts you are or what things are doing. But if you're working to a grid, or you want to place something in a particular point, it's a lot easier for you to actually snap to the grid in here. But generally speaking, we will probably want to work in perspective. This button shows you the view modes that you'll be looking at. So at the moment we're in lit mode, so it's lit by the light and it's got all the textures on it. So we can go in unlit. So this is the basic colors. So this is your diffuse map without any lighting information. We can go into wireframe, which is self-explanatory. It's the wireframe of the level. Detail lighting is your lighting and reflections that you might have. Lighting only is the same but without the reflections. Lighting complexity. So you would notice that this would actually have different colors if you had loads of light shining on it, or it was a sort of particularly well lit area. Shader complexity. Again, if your shaders had more sections or parts, then you'd notice that things would start to turn a brown to red color. So generally speaking, you want to try and keep everything as green as you can in this. Stationary light overlap. We don't have any of those, so that nothing's going to show up for that. Light map density. So I guess we should talk about light maps a little bit. Your light map basically bakes in all of the lighting information from your static lights in the scene. So if you haven't got an object that's going to be moving around, for instance like a wall, you can build some static lighting on it. So these can be different texture sizes, just like your normal textures would be, and depending on your texture size depends on what color you have. So obviously you want to keep smaller objects at a smaller texture size, and larger objects you can afford to give it a higher light map. So basically this will work on how much of the unwrap is actually being taken up. And we have reflections, which is just showing your reflections, and some other sort of useless bits of information for us right now. So we're going to go back to lit mode. This is the main mode that we should look at. So we can, on this button here is the show button, and we can trigger off or turn off certain aspects of the game. So for instance, when we're looking around, you see there's a big grid underneath that level. For instance, we can turn that off by showing on the grid. And now the grid won't show up in game, but sometimes it can get in the way. And we can turn off various other things here. Okay. So we have select and move, rotate, and a scale. So just like in Max, we have 3 different options for our objects. And you'll notice that this object is slightly turned, but the pivot point isn't actually following it. It's following the world pivot at the moment. And you can see that by this button here, which is the giant world next to it. If we click on that, we can turn on local pivot. So the actual pivot of our object will be usable now. And if we turn on the world pivot, we can move it along the world's axes. So sometimes it's necessary to change between those two, depending on what you want to create. So scale and rotate work the same way that they will in Max, so we won't go too detailed into that. So you can turn on surface snapping. So it will snap to particular surfaces. I mean, this is quite useful if you're putting something on the terrain or on a particular surface, but it's not particularly useful for things like this box. Okay, so we're just going to undo that. There you go. So let's turn that off. So we have a grid as well. So if you're creating a large level, sometimes it's better to work in a grid, and that basically means everything snaps together, and we can create sort of basic structures in 3ds Max that will slide together, and we can create a much more complicated level without any worry that things aren't going to line up, or you're going to have gaps between your geometry. So you can toggle that on and off by clicking it. And you can toggle the snap size, so the distance of the actual grid. So that's a grid of 1. And that's a grid of 10. And a grid of 100. And I believe this is in probably centimeters. So we have angle snap. So at the moment this will only snap to 10 degrees. So we're going up in 10-degree increments. And that's because we have 10 degrees set on the rotation grid snap value. We can put this to 5, 10, 15, 120, etc. Or we can do divisions of 360, or we can turn it off completely. So if you turn it off completely, you can do any number you want. And finally, we have snap to scale. So this is your scale snap. So this is useful only when you're using scale. And you'll find that this will scale it in 25%. So it'll get 25% bigger or 25% smaller. So you can find different uses for that, and we can turn that number up or turn it off completely. And this final button in the top toolbar within the viewport is camera speed. So if we're moving around the camera, we're at camera speed 4 right now. So depending on the size of your level, you might want to turn this down or turn this up. So for instance, if you're working on a really small sort of table and you're trying to position things, we want to turn down that camera speed so we weren't rushing past things. Alternatively, if you're working on sort of a massive sort of MMO, we'd want to be able to fly around quickly to get to places. So that's a quick way of changing your camera speed. So let's go put that back to 4. Okay, so we've got maximize or restore this viewport. We can go into 4 viewports like we could in 3ds Max, and we can go back to the top view. So that is a basic walkthrough of the viewport, and next we'll look at modes. Okay, so modes. This is essentially where you actually add in objects. This is the controls. So we can place objects, we can paint onto different terrain, we can create landscapes, we can add in foliage, and we can edit geometry that we add in. And it's important to realize that this geometry isn't stuff that we have created outside of Unreal. So for instance in 3ds Max, this is completely within the editor. So for instance, if I have geometry selected and I drag in a box, it's a completely new bit of geometry that we're using in Engine. So this is particularly useful if we're going to be blocking out a level in UDK or in the Unreal Engine. So you'd block out something within Engine so that everything was to the right scale. You could then export all of that and actually start modeling over it in an external package. And the reason we use an external package is because this isn't a detailed way of modeling. You can do a lot of things, but I wouldn't ever suggest to try and model something using this geometry. So if we wanted to edit it, we can just go to geometry editing, click on a face, and we can just drag that in, or etc. So very sort of basic editing. Okay, so let's talk about the geometry tag. So left-clicking these objects and dragging these into the viewport allows us to create these primitive shapes within our level. So we can add in a cone, cylinder, stairs, and a sphere. So we can just delete those for now. Okay, so that's pretty much the basics of geometry. So let's go into lights. So another important part of being a game artist is being able to light something so that it's atmospheric or particularly emotional, and so that it actually makes your assets look good. Good lighting can make something that's made bad look good. And quite often you'll find in games they will hide bad quality work behind good lighting, and you can get away with it. It's a good sort of legitimate way of working. So let's talk about some of these lights. We got a directional light, which is essentially a global light. This is generally speaking your sun. If we place that in, it means the light will affect everything in the scene that is cast on, so in its specific direction. Rotating the object changes the direction. It's good for emulating mainly the sun or another strong light source. So we've got this arrow facing off of it. If we rotate that round, you notice it gets lit from a particular direction. We've already actually got this light in. It's over here. So if we rotate this one around, you notice the lighting changes in the level. Okay, so what else have we got? We've got a point light. So a point light is your standard type of light. Used for most lights you encounter, such as room lighting, a lamp, mood lighting. It's a 360 directional light. So it originates from a source, and it will travel in all directions until it's blocked or runs out. The range of the light can be controlled by the intuition radius. So if we bring in point light, it's going to move it into this sort of dark area so we can actually see it. So if we go on details, because details, which we'll get into later on, controls how we actually use these objects. So we can change the intensity, so the brightness of it, the intuition, which is the essential fall off, which is also affected by the brightness. So if you make it really bright and actually turn down the fall off, you'll get a sharper edge, which is probably not that useful for most lights. You probably want to have a nice fall off. We can change the light color, so we can make a nice sort of red light, and you know it's closer to the source. If you make it well, and not a flat color, it'll get whiter towards the center, and that's sort of a basic principle of lighting. Light generally is white before it fades off. Okay, so that's point lights. Let's talk about spotlights. So spotlight, and the good thing about UDK is it has all these nice icons which basically describe what they are. So a spotlight has a spotlight as the icon. If you don't know what a spotlight is, it's sort of like stage lighting. So it's a particular directional light, and it's controlled by a directional cone in the case of this engine. Now we can change the cone, like interior, the outer, so we can actually focus that light on a particular area. And hang on, we'll just rotate this so we can actually see it. And there you go, you can see the center light and the exterior, so we can create a nice sort of fall off. And this is the same as the, pretty much the same as the intuition, except the cone defines the edges closer to the light and not the maximum distance. Okay, so let's move on to skylight. A skylight is what it is. It's a skylight. It illuminates everything from the sky, so everything should be equally lit. For instance, actually, if we try and find the doesn't seem to be working. Well, essentially what it does is it illuminates all objects that the sun might not be shining on directly. So if you look outside the window and you look behind a wall, even though the sun might be on the other side of that wall, the wall is still lit. It's still receiving some sort of ambient lighting. So this is what the skylight actually creates. So if we go ahead and we're just going to hit delete. One further thing I'm going to talk about lights is if you bring in the light, we can change the source radius. So if we just change the intensity, we can actually change the source length. And if you notice, this could be good for if you were creating sort of fluorescent lights, so long tubes of light, and the intensity is actually spread along that light, so it's very clever. It doesn't just illuminate all individually, and the radius is how sort of thick that's going to be as well. So you can tell from this sort of yellow bounding box like how wide the light source is. So we can control this and create a light that is more specific. So it's quite a useful tool. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to something else. Let's move on to visuals. Let's move down the chain. So in the visuals tab, we can add entities that will affect the visuals in our level. Because this is an introduction to Unreal 4, it is unlikely that you're actually going to need to use any of these straight away. But I will talk about some of them. So if we just actually scroll this out so we can see it all. So a post-process volume. This adds a post-process. It adds an effect on top of your screen. So it can affect certain areas in different ways. So you could add a particular sort of, I don't know, you could add a film grain on top of a certain area or triggered by a certain spawn point. And it can be useful for sort of changing the lighting in specific places. Atmospheric fog and exponential height fog are what they say. They are fog. They're used to add atmosphere and add sort of fall off of sort of general atmospheric properties. It can be used to actually occlude areas that you don't want to see. So for instance, if you're on top of a tall building, you must have seen this in games, they quite often fog the bottom of the building out so you can't actually see the road. It means it's easier for the artist to actually get away with not modelling loads of little cars and people running around. And this can add realistic fading for faraway objects as well, so it can be really useful. And I would suggest if you actually make a level, you have some sort of fog in it. Reflections. So to actually get your reflections, you need to have a sphere reflection or a box reflection capture. So this is capturing a specific area around this point and using it for reflections nearby. And the reason you don't do sort of absolute realistic reflections, so for instance a window, every window has its own reflection, it's because that's really expensive. You're essentially rendering each of those scenes twice, and by using one capture point that is captured a moment in time rather than is real time, you can save a lot of memory and you can save a lot of sort of rendering time as well. So it's an efficient way of working. I think the first time that I sort of really noticed this was I was playing Halo 2, and the different areas would have different reflection captures that didn't actually quite match up, but they were of the local area that you were in. So decals. Decals are useful for adding specific details to an object. For instance, if we had a base mesh that didn't have any text or images on it, it becomes a lot more reusable than an object that has specific lettering or pictures or words on it. So rather than creating lots of individual meshes that have different things written on them or different sort of effects on them, we can create a base object and we can add sort of decals which are textures that are applied to them. So we can create lots of variation with just a texture rather than different variations in the model. So again, a cheaper and more efficient way of working, and it allows you to reuse your meshes more effectively and create more variety. Decals can also be used for instance to add damage effects when you're actually shooting an object, for example. Okay, so the last one in the place section is basic. So these are basic tools that or basic entities that you could be using in your level. So cameras, self-explanatory. They're a specific camera view that you can use to take screenshots or use within the game. spawn points for the player, triggers that could trigger cinematic events or animations or in-game events. These can sort of be pretty useful for actually setting up something that's actually working as a game environment. Okay, so I think there's another one down here somewhere. There is, it's just hidden. There you go, sorry. Okay, so volumes. Volumes can be used to define an area of effect for a range of things. It can block the player from leaving a defined playing area. So if you ever found that you can't actually jump out of the map, this is a blocking volume. For instance, when you fall off the edge of a map, you'll be killed by a kill Z volume, which is a volume that below a certain point in the Z axis will kill you. And they're good. They're also, these volumes can also be good for defining render areas. So this can save on memory from actually rendering out the entire game. You can render out a specific part which you're actually in. Okay, so that is the basics of the visuals. I'll talk quickly about landscape. So landscape is basically creating a in-game terrain that you can sculpt, or you can actually import one from an external package. We don't actually need to know too much about this, but you've got various tools for creating and editing that terrain. Foliage, you can add in your grass and your trees, and basically what this will do is it will copy one particular mesh, and it can spread that around in an effective way. So it's the reason you put it in as foliage rather than individual meshes is because it's quicker to render because of the way Unreal actually works. Okay, so next we'll be moving on to the content browser. So I'm just going to go ahead and pause for a second. Okay, so let's talk about the content browser. So this is where you can pick up your assets, import them in. It's where you can import in your textures as well, and you can create your materials for particular surfaces. And we'll go into the actual importing process in a later video, but for now let's sort of have a look around and see how things work. So if we go ahead and look at some of their example assets, so we just go on props, and I'm just going to drag in this chair here, and as you can see we can just drag that straight into the scene. We can fly around it. The materials are all been applied previously, and it reacts to the scene perfectly, so that's great. So here in the details panel we can have a look at the material, so the material it's using. We can have a look at the actual mesh that we're using for this object. There's some other different settings that we can have a look at, but those are predominantly the main ones. So let's go ahead and delete that. And let's talk about some particular functions within the content browser. So new. So this is where you can add in your new folders, blueprints, materials, particles, and other entities that you might need to use. So adding a new folder is probably the first thing that we'll actually need to do when starting a new level. So if I just go and do that for you. So before we click on anything, we don't actually want it to drop into this props folder because we have an object selected. By default it will try and drop the folder into there. So we actually just want to drop it straight into the game folder. And we're going to go ahead and click new folder, and we are going to call it example. And you'll notice that now that's underneath the game folder we have our example folder, so it's got nothing else in there, and we can actually use this as our level folder. So what I would do is I would have different folders within this, all named appropriately. And I'd have one for materials, for my textures, for different assets. And that way I can organize myself however I want, but everything's within a particular file, so I don't need to search between all of these to try and find the thing that I want. So there is no maximum amount of folders that you can use. It's whatever you're comfortable with, but I would suggest that you have at least 3 within this, so your materials, your textures, and your assets. Okay, so let's look at the import button. So this is where we add in externally made files. So for instance, we can add in 3ds Max files from here. So we can add in all these different types of files. And the one we'll probably be using the most is an FBX file, which is 3ds Max's standard document file. Okay, so let's see what else we have. So we have another save button here. So this would just save all the modified assets within here. So if we change the settings for a particular asset, or we change a material, this button here will save everything. So this will save in the content browser. I'm speaking from experience that it's worth saving often. Especially after changing something drastic or spending a long time on something. It's quite easy to keep putting it off until you've completed what you're doing, but saving takes at the most a couple of seconds, whereas redoing an entire part of a level can take days. So we need to save often and save iterations of your work, and this should go for everything that you make. There's nothing worse than finishing something only to have it crash. So make sure you save your actual level. So it's, rather than using this save button, it's probably better to hit the save one right at the top. Okay, so that is pretty much it for the content browser. We're just going to talk about the scene outliner. So the scene outliner is this tab up here. You can find everything you've placed inside of the level in here. So it's great for navigating. So if you want to find a particular object or a particular entity, we can just go ahead and click that, and it basically selects it in the scene. We can double click that and it'll actually navigate us to that particular object. So that can be really useful, especially if you have hundreds of objects in your scene. And this is also another reason why you should have things named properly, because if nothing's named, how are you going to be able to find your particular chair if it's called Object 1 or Object 408? So yeah, name things appropriately. For instance, a corner wall in an atrium should be called atrium underscore wall underscore A, B, or C, etc. A bench in the same place should be called atrium underscore PRP for prop underscore bench. It's basic sort of simple naming structure that enables you to find what you're looking for. It isn't an absolute file naming structure. You can name things how you want, but just be aware that if you're not the only person working on something, agree on something beforehand. Otherwise, you'll have like 4 naming structures going on. Okay, so that's the scene outliner, and the last one we're going to be looking at is the details panel. So we've had a look at this a little bit already, but this basically defines the details on your selected objects or entities. So if a standard asset is selected, you have information similar to this. I'm just going to find something. Oh, let's go ahead and just delete that. And we'll just drag in this chair. So yeah, you'll have your static mesh, your materials, your lighting, physics, collision, tags, rendering, actor. So for different objects, you'll have different options. For instance, when we added in lights, let's go ahead and add in a point light. You add intensity, light color, source radius, etc. And for all of these, you actually have transforms, so we can actually change the scale of certain things here. So we can just enter numbers by deleting that and typing in a number. And obviously that's not actually going to do anything for this because it's a light object. It's not actually going to scale up. Okay, so yeah, specific entities have a specific functions, but I'll leave that for you to find. And there isn't generally a lot that you want to change other than your lights. Okay, so I think that is most of the information that we actually need to look at. So let's go ahead and just quickly look at the static mesh viewer before we finish this. So if you double click on an object in the scene, now this is particularly useful if you've just added in a new object and you want to apply your materials to it. So let's go ahead and double click that. I'm just going to actually get rid of this texture. So this is what your object will actually be imported in as. So you have like this checkerboard on, and you won't actually have any materials applied to this. Okay, so we can have a look at different channels. So we can have a look at the UVs. We can have a look at our collision, the wireframe, view it in real time, and save it, etc. So that's the basic sort of understanding of that. If we just close that down for a second, we can find our textures. So here you have the textures that have been saved for the level. So if we just navigate down to chair, and they use weird naming structures, so I might not actually be able to find this. But this is where all your textures are saved in. And the textures you can't actually just apply these to your specific prop or the specific object. You need to be able to make a material for them first. So we right click on that, we can create material, and we'll just look at some of the ones that they've created. So let's look at the if we just have a look at this sort of hexagonal pulsing ground texture. This might confuse you a little bit, but essentially what you have is different options, different inputs. So you have your base color, which is your diffuse, metallic, specular, roughness, emissive, normal, etc. So we can have loads of different inputs, and we can activate these by changing them in materials. But we'll go into this a little bit later. But this is essentially the same as the 3ds Max slate material editors. So it's quite good to get used to that in 3ds Max, because this is predominantly the way that you'll actually be viewing your textures. So let's go ahead and end this video, and we'll catch up next in the Unreal Engine 4 second part tutorial, which will be importing an asset into Unreal Engine 4. Okay, thank you for listening.